Good afternoon. I'm Eric Blank, and this is the Commissioners' deliberation meeting in Tri-State Generation and Transmission Phase 2 ERP 23A-0585E. Mr. Davis, get us going.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Ron Davis of the Commission's advisory staff, and I'm going to be joined today by Commission Counsel Alex Cicera. The scheduling of this deliberations meeting was just discussed by the Commissioners on Wednesday at its weekly meeting. And as I explained then, the purpose of today's meeting is for the Commission to render a Phase 2 decision to bring this electric resource plan for Tri-State Generation and Transmission Association to a close. In the interest of time, I won't repeat the full introduction of the case. That is available on the PUC's YouTube channel. But to start us off today, I'll set the stage by highlighting the key elements of Tri-State's Phase 2 implementation report. That report, filed in April, summarizes the bid evaluation and selection resulting from Tri-State's competitive RFP solicitations. Those were for new utility resources pursuant to the Commission's Phase 1 decision. Tri-State's preferred portfolio of selected resources, also called Portfolio 4 or Flex SR, adds 700 megawatts of wind and solar, 600 megawatts of storage, and 300 megawatts of gas generation, and that's between 2026 and 2031. The Phase 2 ERP also entails Tri-State replacing the gas turbines at its J.M. Schaefer plant to improve that plant's capacity contributions. And importantly, the preferred portfolio maintains the previously announced coal plant retirements at Craig and Springerville. Tri-State explains that its preferred portfolio was selected for its overall performance across established reliability, environmental, and financial categories as analyzed and described in the report. Tri-State asserts that the portfolios meet both Level 1 and Level 2 reliability metrics. Tri-State clarifies that its preferred portfolio also meets Colorado emission reduction targets for greenhouse gases, the Colorado Renewable Energy Standard, and the New Mexico Renewable Portfolio Standard. And Tri-State further claims that the preferred plan is the least cost portfolio from the perspective of the rates its co-op members will pay. Stepping back a bit, Tri-State summarizes in the report the factors that the Commission must consider in rendering a Phase 2 decision pursuant to Rule 3605. This summary relates to 6 model portfolios presented in the report. Those 6 model portfolios reflect commitments related to the Phase 1 settlement agreement. Tri-State used the Encompass model. It's a resource planning software to complete the capacity expansion and portfolio optimization analyses. The resource acquisition period for Phase 2 is 2026 through 2031, with the full resource planning period modeled for 2024 through 2043. And due to terms of the Phase 1 settlement and otherwise anticipating potential interest in the portfolio that entails, quote, no new gas, Tri-State devotes specific attention to Portfolio 6 in its implementation report. Portfolio 6 essentially replaces the 307 megawatt gas turbine project in the preferred portfolio with more storage, or an additional 550 megawatts of storage. So in other words, both the preferred portfolio and Portfolio 6 include the same 400 megawatts of wind, 200 megawatts of solar, and 650 megawatts of battery storage. And both portfolios also reflect those turbine replacements at Schaefer. In terms of environmental factors, Tri-State explains that the Phase 2 modeling indicates that all 6 portfolios are able to achieve the Colorado emission reduction targets in 2025, 2026, 2027, and 2030. Tri-State concludes that the forecasted emission reductions in 2030 meet the minimum statutory requirement and do not vary substantially across the 6 portfolios. In its comparative financial analysis, Tri-State explains that the preferred portfolio requires the least amount of resource additions with less transmission capital expenditures. Tri-State also raises concerns about the potential risk in over-reliance on 4-hour batteries suggested by the resource additions in portfolios 5 and 6. Tri-State admits that it has not yet deployed any batteries on its system, and that the technology is new to Tri-State. Tri-State also asserts that its preferred portfolio is a superior option for the Commission to adopt as the cost-effective resource plan. The preferred portfolio is shown to have a lower cost, that is, in terms of present value of revenue requirements, in the scenario without consideration of social cost of emissions, or about $88 million lower than the next best alternative. Tri-State explains in the report that it will remain in a capacity long position until 2030. However, Tri-State states that the resource acquisitions that cause that long position are required to ensure ongoing resource adequacy and reliability as the two coal units, Craig and Springerville, are retired in 2028 and 2031. The coal retirements are necessary those years to maintain progress towards emission reductions for Colorado statutory compliance, and they are necessary to maintain new era funding eligibility that is needed by Tri-State. Tri-State states that waiting to procure resources needed for 2030 until the 2027 ERP would not be prudent, given that the 2027 ERP Phase 2 process may not conclude until late 2028 or early 2029. With respect to reliability, Tri-State states that each portfolio meets the level 1 and level 2 reliability metrics, but that the preferred portfolio, quote, achieves reliability in the most cost-effective manner. Tri-State states that the retirement of dispatchable coal resources cannot be affordably or reliably replaced solely with semi-dispatchable resources. The new resources, including the dispatchable gas plant in Moffat County, will provide jobs and tax-based support that Tri-State says is necessary across its system. And for transmission costing purposes, Tri-State explains that it completed an interconnection optimization for two of the portfolios, the preferred portfolio and that portfolio 6. According to Tri-State, optimizing the preferred portfolio enabled the avoidance of approximately $370 million in transmission capital expenditures, while optimizing the portfolio 6 enabled the avoidance of approximately $317 million in transmission capex. In sum, Tri-State concludes that its report provides extensive detail on the multiple portfolios modeled and, quote, builds a clear record that supports approval of Tri-State's preferred portfolio. Tri-State thus requests that the Commission approve the preferred portfolio as the final cost-effective resource plan in its Phase 2 decision. Now, as explained on Wednesday at the weekly meeting, Phase 2 is a plan implementation process, and it follows an adjudication that culminates in a Phase 1 decision. That means that Phase 2 is not an adjudication. Instead, there's a comment process that culminates in the Commission rendering a Phase 2 decision. Pursuant to that comment process, comments were filed by many of the parties in this case, and the presentation of these comments as they relate to the adoption of a cost-effective resource plan will comprise the bulk of my presentation. In addition to those comments, Tri-State retained an independent evaluator for this ERP. The IE concludes in its Phase 2 report that Tri-State's RFP process was conducted fairly, without bias towards any or against any acceptable technology or respondent. The IE further concludes that the established portfolios were adhered to and that it is unaware of any improper contact between Tri-State or any bidder. The IE also states that all assumptions used in the Encompass modeling were reasonable and that the overall scoring process was conducted fairly without bias. On May 12th, the Air Pollution Control Division of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment filed a verification report. The report indicates that House Bill 21-1266 requires Tri-State to submit an ERP to the Commission that achieves at least an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions associated with Tri-State sales to customers within Colorado by 2030, and that is compared to a 2005 baseline. As part of House Bill 21-1266, the APCD is required to provide verification of the emissions reductions projected in the ERP. The verification report filed in this proceeding explains that the modeling data provided by Tri-State was used to cross-check the entries in the calculation of emissions in accordance with its verification workbook and associated guidance. APCD concludes that the emission reductions for the preferred portfolio are 80% below baseline levels. Now turning to the party comments, trial staff of the commission asserts that it does not oppose approval of Tri-State's preferred portfolio, but also does not approval of the no new gas version of that portfolio, or portfolio 6. However, staff notes that the transmission optimization was only applied to those two portfolios, which makes it impossible to directly compare those two portfolios to the others. Staff also states that Tri-State's proposal to replace the gas turbines at Schaefer was not examined in Phase 1, and since the preferred portfolio and Portfolio 6 cannot be compared to the other portfolios, it's not possible to determine the costs and benefits of the Schaefer turbine replacements. Staff hence asks that Tri-State provide a better process for evaluation of any similar projects in future electric resource plan proceedings. The Office of the Utility Advocate, or UCA, supports Tri-State's preferred portfolio because it has the lowest present value of revenue requirements and because it provides gas-fired capacity in Western Colorado. And like staff, UCA notes that Tri-State's proposal to replace the turbines at Schaefer were not disclosed in Phase 1 and that the capacity factors for the Schaefer and other CT units appear to be inconsistent with the heat rates of similar plants. UCA also generally supports the inclusion of transmission costs that relate to bids, but it raises concerns and offers some suggestion related to the transmission-related analyses that are presented in the implementation report. The Colorado Energy Office argues that Tri-State's preferred portfolio aligns with clean energy and greenhouse gas emissions reduction policy requirements and goals. CE notes that although the portfolio includes a new gas plant and the replacement of Schaefer turbines, all the turbines being proposed are both gas and hydrogen capable, which presents the opportunity to transition to even lower greenhouse gas emitting resources over the long term. CEO also contends that the portfolio that Tri-State prefers supports just transition efforts in Moffat County, as well as with what Tri-State, the City of Craig, and Moffat County endorsed in the Phase 1 settlement agreement. CEO states co-locating gas resources in Moffat County could provide additional support to the City of Craig and Moffat County and cost savings opportunities for Tri-State's members. CEO further suggests that Tri-State should use the acquisition of 650 megawatts of storage to gain familiarity with the technology, to reduce the curtailments of renewables, and to minimize the use of gas and coal. Moffat County and the City of Craig fully support the preferred portfolio and note that the two resources proposed for Moffat County, the new gas facility and a 200 megawatt storage asset, have the potential to provide significant tax revenues for the local community and taxing districts. San Isabel Electric and KC Electric also support the preferred portfolio, as do the co-ops in the collection of Wyoming co-ops that intervened in the case and have participated as parties. But not all of the parties endorse the preferred plan. Sierra Club and Natural Resource Defense Council, together called the Conservation Coalition, object to the Commission approval of Tri-State's preferred portfolio and instead support Portfolio 6. They argue that Portfolio 6 has the lowest capital cost for generation and transmission during the periods analyzed and the lowest present value revenue requirement when including the social cost of emissions. The Conservation Coalition further notes that the preferred portfolio and Portfolio 6 have the same local economic benefits because the Phase 1 settlement agreement guarantees significant community assistance payments by Tri-State regardless of which portfolio the Commission approves. Specifically, under any portfolio, Tri-State will pay $22 million to an economic development fund administered by Moffat County and the City of Craig, as well as payments for lost tax revenue to Moffat County and the City of Craig, totaling $48 million from 2028 through 2038. With respect to reliability, the Conservation Coalition argues that both the preferred portfolio and Portfolio 6 meet Level 1 and Level 2 reliability metrics, stating that with both having no unserved energy or zero loss of load probability and both having nearly identical reserve margins, reliability is not a basis for rejecting Portfolio 6, as the portfolio meets all of the same reliability metrics as Portfolio 4. The Conservation Coalition goes on to emphasize that solar curtailment costs will be more than $100,000 lower for Portfolio 6. Because Portfolio 6 would add battery projects over a 5-year period, it would enable Tri-State to gain the experience it needs. Portfolio 6 leads to a diverse generation portfolio, one that is perhaps more diverse than any other Colorado utility generation fleet. And while Tri-State asserts that storage technologies with lower costs and superior characteristics will be commercially available soon, the Conservation Coalition states that Tri-State has no supporting evidence to support that conclusion. According to the Conservation Coalition, Tri-State's advocacy in favor of the preferred plan raises a question. Why build a new gas plant in 2029 that is not needed until 2031 if it's needed at all? Why not wait until the next ERP to revisit the need for a new gas plant? It also argues that Tri-State's claims about the economics of the new gas plant depend on another questionable assumption. Can Tri-State build, or should Tri-State build a gas plant in order to make large amounts of off-system sales? And finally, the Conservation Coalition suggests that there are serious questions of accuracy in Tri-State's Phase 2 modeling. It explains that Tri-State has taken at face value the bidder specifications that the heat rate of the new gas plant would be significantly lower than any publicly available heat rates for comparable combustion turbines, and that rather than verifying these questionable assumptions or seek contractual guarantees that those would be achieved, Tri-State simply plugged those values into the model and returned the results. For these reasons, according to the Conservation Coalition, the Commission should view Tri-State's economic modeling of this proposed new gas plant with deep skepticism. And in its comments, WRA, Western Resource Advocate, raises many of the same arguments, objecting to the approval of Tri-State's preferred portfolio, instead supporting the adoption of Portfolio 6 in the Commission's Phase 2 decision. Like the Conservation Coalition, WRA claims that Portfolio 6 has the lower capital costs over the planning period, the lowest renewable curtailment costs, and the lowest present value of revenue requirements when accounting for the social cost of emissions. WRA also raises criticisms regarding the plans for Schaefer and Tri-State's Phase 2 modeling. WRA then notes that the portfolios presented in the report only achieve an expected 80% emission reduction by 2030, and that while that's required by statute, the portfolios go no further. WRA goes on to argue that Tri-State's modeling of energy sales and carbon intensity changed significantly from Phase 1 to Phase 2, and WRA argues that these divergent results are nonsensical, pointing specifically to the results for net market sales. And finally, WRA suggests that when selecting a portfolio in this proceeding, the Commission should consider the real risk that new gas resources may become stranded assets, in addition to potentially slowing progress to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The Colorado Independent Energy Association filed comments, but it primarily focuses on Tri-State's bid scoring process for this Phase 2 and does not provide comments on the final portfolio selection. In short, CIEA argues that Tri-State's report did not provide detail as to the bids that failed each individual non-price factor screen or cite to individual bids as to its NPF evaluation. And in its comments, the Colorado Solar and Storage Association asked Tri-State to explain the impacts of the launch of SPP RTO West on Tri-State's interconnection process for projects that are part of the Phase 2 portfolio, as well as for projects requesting interconnection on Tri-State's system that are not part of this ERP. In addition to the party comments, several sets of public comments were filed. For example, several dozen members of the retail co-op served by Tri-State filed individual comments objecting to the acquisition of new gas-fired resources, while otherwise supporting Tri-State's plans to acquire renewables and storage. A petition was also filed by over 200 co-op members, again favoring the acquisition of renewables and storage, but objecting to the new gas plant. And a number of local government officials in Colorado communities served by Tri-State, including county commissioners, elected town officials, and local government employees, likewise support the adoption of Portfolio 6 instead of Portfolio 4. Certain Tri-State members and local government officials in New Mexico similarly expressed support for, quote, the approval and implementation of a plan that puts Tri-State on the path to delivering 100% clean energy. But in contrast, the Craig Rural Fire Protection District filed comments in support of Tri-State's preferred portfolio, and other co-ops that were not parties to the proceeding filed similar comments in support of the preferred portfolio. In response to comments filed on June 10th, Tri-State defends the selection of its preferred portfolio, arguing again that the projected costs are $88 million lower when compared to the next closest alternative, which addresses a critical cost need, cross concern for Tri-State's members. And additionally, Tri-State maintains that its preferred portfolio supports Colorado employment, providing stable tax revenue for Moffat County, and achieves the state-verified greenhouse gas reductions consistent with state requirements. With respect to the advocacy of the Conservation Coalition and WRA to require Portfolio 6 over the preferred portfolio, Tri-State emphasizes that dispatchable CT capacity bids and semi-dispatchable battery capacity are not identical. Tri-State claims that Portfolio 6 does not offer the resources needed in the western part of the state for spinning reserves, for example, and without a reliable resource to fill that specific gap, the stability of the system could be compromised, leading to increased operational risks and higher overall costs. Tri-State further argues its preferred portfolio includes a robust dispatchable generation set of dispatchable generation resources that support grid reliability, especially during peak demand periods or when renewable resources are insufficient. And more generally, with respect to reliability metrics, Tri-State explains that although they are critical, they do not assess the benefits of a balanced energy strategy, including factors such as the value of reserves for system balancing. With respect to the Conservation Coalition's contention that the heat rate for the selected CT gas plant in the preferred portfolio appears to be lower than the specifications for comparable turbines, Tri-State admits that it simply used the heat rate as supplied by the bidder to conduct the Phase 2 modeling. Nevertheless, Tri-State argues that the selection of the plant within the portfolio is driven primarily by the need for dispatchable capacity, and that even if the heat rate of the plant is increased, the potential result will only be a reduction in the annual capacity factor for the plant, but the model would likely still select that same resource. Tri-State further explains that regardless of the heat rate guaranteed under the contract, Tri-State is committed to operating its system in a manner to achieve the Colorado greenhouse gas targets. And finally, Tri-State notes in its response comments that the global market for renewable energy equipment is volatile, and recent U.S. tax and trade actions have introduced material pricing risks that Tri-State hopes to mitigate by promptly executing bid agreements. In addition to those comments, there are 3 other filings that I'd like to briefly present before we turn to your discussion. I mention these as they are relevant to the first decisions the Commission is going to render, but they will be fully addressed by Mr. Serra later in these deliberations. First, on June 18th, the Conservation Coalition and WRA filed a joint motion alleging that Tri-State violated the terms of this Phase 1 settlement agreement, particularly in the assessment within its response comments of the reliability attributes of the resources presented in the report. The movements assert that Commission cannot approve Tri-State's preferred portfolio when Tri-State itself acknowledges that its modeling of the preferred portfolio rests on an incorrect value for a key input. They suggest that the Commission take 2 actions. First, strike and give no weight to Tri-State's statements on pages 12 and 13 of its response comments, stating that a portfolio is reliable only if it includes a new gas plant in Western Colorado, and two, either require Tri-State to rerun the modeling of the preferred portfolio with the correct inputs for the Moffat County gas plant and provide a summary of changes to the results for the portfolio, including resource build decisions, system costs, emission and utilization of the new gas plant, or refuse to approve any portfolio that includes that gas plant bid, which was modeled with an incorrect input. Second, Tri-State filed a response to that motion, objecting to all of the relief sought. Tri-State argues that the motion is an improper attempt to reply to Tri-State's response comments, a procedural step not contemplated in the Commission's ERP rules. Tri-State further argues that because time is of the essence for the Commission to issue its Phase 2 decision, granting certain of the relief sought in the motion, such as additional modeling, will prolong the process and could expose Tri-State and its members to higher prices or lost opportunities. Tri-State asserts that it complied with the settlement agreement by ensuring that all portfolios were modeled to meet level 1 and 2 reliability metrics. Tri-State further contends that nothing in the settlement or the Commission's rules supports excising Tri-State's statements in its response simply because the conservation parties disagree with them. And Tri-State argues that running the model again might change the projected net present value of Portfolio 4 or its emissions by a modest amount, but it would not likely lead to a different portfolio being superior. On the other hand, the harm of a delay is tangible. According to Tri-State, potential higher costs to its members and potential failure to meet planned in-service dates if procurement and interconnection is stalled, that will lead to higher costs, and that the public interest favors moving forward with a decision based on the best available information now. And the third document is COSACIA's response to the same motion. And they asked the Commission to move quickly on a Phase 2 decision, opposing any remodeling of Portfolio 4, citing the urgent need to approve clean energy resources while current federal tax incentives, specifically the PTC and the ITC, are still available. They warned that remodeling would introduce delays that could result in lost funding opportunities, and if the Commission does grant the motion to remodel, COSACIA urges the Commission to immediately approve all of the renewable energy projects common to both portfolios. And that would allow Tri-State to move forward with acquiring those projects while this modeling dispute is resolved. And they also propose that if the Commission finds the record inadequate to support Portfolio 4, it should approve Portfolio 6 as a fallback, recognizing that this path too carries litigation and delay risks. So that is the full background that I think is necessary for you to move forward to the first decision point. But I'll also suggest that the Commission approach this by adopting a Phase 2 decision that satisfies the Phase 2 decision requirement set forth in Rule 3605. But unlike many previous Phase 2 decisions, it would not address requirements for the utility's next ERP. So that means we'd take on the questions whether the modeling and the presentation of the portfolios is sufficient to enable the Commission to render a decision on a cost-effective resource plan, and whether to approve Tri-State's preferred portfolio or instead to condition, modify, or reject the preferred portfolio pursuant to the ERP rules for Tri-State. As I mentioned earlier, many of the comments filed in Phase 2 address Tri-State's next ERP, but that won't be filed until late 2027. So further consideration of those comments may be warranted, but there's also sufficient time for the Commission to assess Tri-State's next ERP well before that filing is made in more than 2 years. And moreover, the issues raised in the Phase 2 comments in this proceeding mirror some of the same comments that were raised in Tri-State's previous ERP case. And it may make sense for the Commission to take a different approach leading up to what will be Tri-State's third ERP for Commission approval. And as noted by COSA, Tri-State is planning to join SPP RTO West. Tri-State has filed an application for the Commission's review and a potential public interest determination in proceeding 23A-0585E. In that proceeding, Tri-State explains that on June 4th of 2024, SPP submitted to FERC proposed revisions to its open access transmission tariff, bylaws, and membership agreement to facilitate the commitment of 9 entities in the Western Interconnection, including Tri-State, to join the SPP RTO. And importantly, those transmission owners would place their transmission facilities under SPP's functional control under that new OATT by April 1st of next year. So in sum, Mr. Serra and I suggest that a future separate proceeding devoted to examining how best to review Tri-State's ERP when it's a full member of SPP RTO West makes more sense than developing recommendations for the next ERP and directives for the next ERP in this Phase 2 decision. So now I'd like to put forward the first suggested decision point for your discussion. Should the Commission establish in its Phase 2 decision that Tri-State's preferred portfolio is the cost-effective resource plan resulting from this ERP proceeding?
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for the comprehensive and thorough presentation. Greatly appreciated. And I'll just jump first, and then really curious to hear where you guys are coming from. For me, for Phase 2 of the Tri-State ERP, I think that our main role is to ensure that the utility respects the stakeholders, considers and responds to the requests, and selects a portfolio that is reasonably supported by evidence in the record. For me, given our lack of rate regulation over Tri-State, I don't think we should be substituting our judgment for that of the utility when there's a tough choice to be made between competing portfolios where either could be deemed reasonable. So more specifically, I'd find that Tri-State's choice of portfolio 4 is reasonable and supported by evidence on this record. On a pure economic net PV basis, it's $88 million cheaper than portfolio 6. Given that battery storage is new to Tri-State and that the utility is committed to acquiring 600 megawatts of batteries even in portfolio 4, I can understand the resource diversity benefit of natural gas, particularly when you consider ancillary services. It also seems that putting new natural gas in Moffat County helps bring additional economic development and tax base to a community which could really use it. And portfolio 4 is supported by a broad range of parties, including the local communities. Finally, this record suggests that both portfolio 4 and 6 comply with our emission reduction targets. So I'd vote to support Tri-State's decision to move forward with portfolio 4 as being a reasonable path forward based on the evidence in this record. So that's where I'm coming from. Commissioner Gilman, curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate the discussion as well as when we'll take up suggestions for the next ERP from Mr. Davis. I think Tri-State's description of this as a clear record is probably overly generous. There certainly were modeling challenges and doubts that interveners still raised. So I think it's really going to be critically important that in a process that follows this, we really have a way to engage those interveners and make some real progress to hopefully clear some of these challenges and get a better, more clear record in the future, because there were some really legitimate concerns with some of the information and how it was done. So I'm fine with doing that in a separate process to kind of give it the airtime it needs, but that would be really critical as we approach the third ERP, because there is some true progress to be made here in a clearer record, in some better data with fewer challenges here. And then, I think as you brought up, Chairman, there's a lot going on here. I mean, there's just transition elements, there's urgency of execution, especially on the renewables, and then there's kind of all the financial and environmental elements that go in as well. At the end of the day, I think it likely is reasonable to allow them to move forward with portfolio 4, which is their preferred portfolio. There are some caveats to that. Certainly the least cost determination is a bit nuanced by the fact that when the cost of emissions are included it's more costly, and PVRR has higher capital costs and more costly curtailments for renewables than the other plans. So I'm not sure the least cost determination that's claimed is as cut and dry as just one sentence. There are layers to that, and there are certainly futures in which it is not the least cost path for them to take. None of us know exactly how things will play out moving forward, but I just wanted to kind of provide that color, based on what we know and don't know in the record. That is a bit of a nuanced determination here. Also, I somewhat respect their interest in resource diversity, but also would point out, their interest in gas over more storage. So in essence, portfolio 4 over portfolio 6 lacks an enormous amount of credibility because they don't have any experience with storage thus far. So, it's maybe difficult to say since this will be their first experience in storage, but making the statements preemptively that they know that the gas decision will essentially be better than storage is a little difficult to credibly say entirely, since they don't have experience with storage to kind of back up actual experience in the area. I think at the end of the day, given kind of the somewhat equivalency of a lot of the economic situation, it's very close. Economically, it seems that going down the path of additional fossil fuel, a new gas plant with portfolio 4 could have its own risks associated. But given the commission's limited jurisdiction, which you brought up, and Tri-State's knowledge of those risks, I think I've settled on the fact that it's likely their financial risk to make. I certainly hope their board and members are fully aware of the choice that's being made here, and really the close call between these two portfolios as we look economically at that going forward. But in essence, if there are risks to stranded assets, as were brought up by some of the interveners, that is Tri-State and their members' risk at the end of the day here, given where our jurisdiction ends. So, happy to hear from Commissioner Plant.
I just would say I share all your concerns. I may have a more relaxed standard of what role we're playing, but I'd be happy to echo all those concerns and support those concerns in the final order. But with that, Commissioner Plant, really curious to hear where you're coming from.
Thanks. Well, I agree with both of your observations on this. I would say if we were not in such a currently uncertain environment as it relates to a major part of the plans that have been proposed here, that I might want to get some better modeling on the gas plant. I think that they really failed there, and acknowledged that it was a failure in the way that the gas plant was modeled, but said, well, we don't think it's going to make that much of a difference anyway. So that kind of points to, well, why do you do the modeling? But we are in a situation where I think time is of the essence. And I think that the difference between these two plans, 4 and 6, which I think it really comes down to 4 and 6, the renewable components of those are identical. And so hopefully those can move forward and quickly. And even if there is any kind of triple R or anything like that. In terms of the storage, I'm not sure I completely buy we just don't know how storage and how batteries are going to work. I mean, there's a lot of experience out there on batteries. It's not a particularly new technology. What I would like to see them do is allow their distribution cooperatives to invest in energy storage and get the benefits of demand charge reductions, which is something that they've opposed, and one of the reasons that United left. So I think that they have some opportunities to do a better job of managing demand through their distribution co-ops and through the use of energy storage at those distribution co-ops that could be to the benefit of all of their members. But they've chosen not to really pursue those opportunities, and I hope that that changes in the future. But with that, I would support the preferred plan.
Does that give you what you need on that one, Mr. Davis? And I don't know if that sort of moots out the various motions.
Well, it gives me what I need, and I think that it may address certain elements of that motion, but I will turn it over to Mr. Osera to make that determination of whether additional discussion and votes are required.
Yeah, there's still part of the motion that's outstanding, which is the request to strike some of Tri-State's testimony from the record. Let's see, the movements argue that Tri-State's Phase 2 testimony and comments apply different reliability rubrics to Portfolio 4 and to other portfolios, which they allege is in violation of Section 4.8.2 of the settlement. That provision required uniform application of two sets of stakeholder-developed reliability metrics, Level 1 and Level 2, across all portfolios. According to the motion, Tri-State's discussion of operational concerns related to Portfolio 4 implies that only gas-inclusive portfolios are reliable, despite all portfolios having passed the agreed-upon reliability screens. We acknowledge the importance of ensuring that all parties adhere to the commitments in a settlement agreement. But in this case, the record reflects that Tri-State did, in fact, apply the Level 1 and Level 2 metrics to all portfolios, and that all 6 of them passed those screens. No party disputes that point. The settlement agreement also provides that all settling parties, including Tri-State, retain the right to take any position on the Phase 2 modeling. That includes the right to present arguments about system operations, local constraints, or practical considerations that may go beyond the reliability metrics that the stakeholders developed for modeling. The agreement does not constrain what those arguments can be, so long as the portfolios meet the agreed reliability thresholds. So while the movements express concern that Tri-State's Phase 2 comments create an impression that only Portfolio 4 is reliable, it's important to distinguish between modeling and compliance and advocacy. The settlement required uniform modeling, which Tri-State provided. It did not bind parties to silence on the issues of operational judgment or regional grid conditions during Phase 2. From a procedural standpoint, I also note that striking testimony is a significant remedy, typically reserved for cases where a party has clearly violated procedural rules or made improper submissions. In this case, Tri-State's testimony is based on its interpretation of how to meet reliability and operational needs in its system, and it is within the bounds of what the settlement permits. There's no evidence of the type of misrepresentations that would warrant striking testimony, and/or that Tri-State failed to comply with the framework that the parties agreed to. Ultimately, as Mr. Davis talked about earlier, this proceeding calls on the Commission to weigh the arguments and supporting evidence from all the parties in determining which portfolio best meets the statutory criteria. But selectively excluding portions of one party's advocacy, particularly when the agreement explicitly preserved the right to present such positions, would really raise concerns about fairness and consistency. So I recommend the Commission deny the request to strike Tri-State's Phase 2 comments. Doing so will affirm the integrity of the settlement agreement and the openness of the Phase 2 process for all parties to fully present their views. And I think that's open for a vote for all of you. I'm not sure.
Maybe
Chair Blank
the
freeze?
chairman's
I think
frozen.
he's frozen.
Yeah, I'm
Give
back.
him-
Oh,
Okay.
there we go.
Commissioner Goen,
Thanks, Mr. Sarah. I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I also agree.
as do I. And do you have anything else, Mr. Osera? I have one more issue I want to take up before we break.
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Davis to talk about the request for reporting requirements that COSA and SIA had included in their response to the Conservation Coalition's motion.
All right, and I have one thing on the Conservation Coalition request to us on reliability. Well, why don't I do mine first, and then I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Davis. At the end of the Conservation Coalition comments, there's a reference to a DOE, a U.S. Department of Energy, May 23rd, 2025 order under Section 202C of the Federal Power Act that instructed MISO and Consumers Energy to keep open an aging coal plant past its May 2025 planned retirement. That order found that there's an energy emergency in MISO, and retaining that plant's coal plant was necessary to avert that emergency. The Conservation Coalition comments ask us to enter a phase 2 finding that the record in this case shows that the Craig Unit 1 is not needed to maintain system reliability. I'd like to do that if, based on this record, if that would work for you. So Commissioner Gilman, would you be okay entering that finding?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, appropriate, especially given Tri-State's own comments as to their resource position, given those plans already.
Commissioner Plant?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Davis.
Right. So I'll just jump to a recommendation on the matter that is raised in COSAC's response to Tri-State's motion. And that decision point is, should the commission require Tri-State to file reports on its contract negotiation with bidders? And I recommend that the commission say no. The commission does not have jurisdiction over Tri-State, and therefore the commission should decline to require the same sort of reporting that the commission is required for Public Service Company of Colorado, for example. The ERP rules for Tri-State contemplate the substantive end of the commission's actions in an ERP upon the issuance of a phase 2 decision. However, there will be a proposal made eventually for confidential and highly confidential information to be released in the future, but I think that it's not necessary for Tri-State to file those reports.
Commissioner Gilman?
Thanks, Mr. Davis. Yeah, I agree, especially given Tri-State's, ownership structure. I think it is very squarely in their best interest to move with expediency to ensure that they receive for themselves and for their members, in essence, all of the available funding, which understood is time limited and has some urgency to it. So I have every reason to believe that they would be very interested in ensuring that they're moving with the expediency that's required.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree.
As do I. Anything else for this deliberation?
Yes, a few things. Yes. The commission's rules and section 42-129 of Colorado statutes require the commission to address best value employment metrics in a phase 2 decision. I'll jump to a recommendation on that. Tri-State has provided the commission with the requisite information, and none of the party comments have substantively addressed that issue. So we suggest that the commission adopt similar language in its phase 2 decision here as it used in the phase 2 decision in Tri-State's first ERP when faced with the same limited set of information. That is, upon review of the materials, Tri-State has complied with the rules, and regarding the facilities that it will own and operate, the commission would enter a finding that because it is not constructing or expanding the facility itself, it has not provided a project labor agreement, but it will require developers and EPC contracts to be responsible for determining whether a project labor agreement will be used. So that vote is to set up the best value employment metrics consideration that is required.
Commissioner Gilman?
I agree.
Commissioner Plant?
I also agree.
As do I.
Now, Tri-State has asked for CPCN requirements to be waived for a couple of the actions related to this ERP. The phase 1 of this ERP culminated in a settlement agreement through decision R240602. That recommended decision was issued by ALJ Segev, and he approved the settlement agreement. And as it was a comprehensive unopposed settlement, that became the Commission's Phase 1 decision. And when I introduced the case on Wednesday, I mentioned that Tri-State had filed a motion for waivers a few days after filing its Phase 2 implementation report. Yet by that motion, Tri-State says that it would like the Commission to waive the requirements to file separate CPCN applications for the potential construction of the gas-fired generation, and also not to file a CPCN for the retirement of Craig. Tri-State argues that granting this motion would avoid unnecessary regulatory burden and promote efficient Commission review. Tri-State also states that the Commission's final decision here will comprehensively address both the need and the public interest for constructing the gas resource, and that a Commission decision in Phase 1 already fully considered and approved the Craig Station requirement. Now, what's unusual here is that ALJ Segev has issued an interim decision granting the motion. What I will recommend now is that the Commission adopt the findings of that interim decision in its final Phase 2 decision here. I recommend that the Phase 2 decision incorporate the findings with respect to Craig, that no separate CPCN filing is necessary to support that retirement. And also regarding the new gas plant in Moffat County, I recommend that the Phase 2 decision also incorporate the findings that were entered in ALJ Segev's interim decision, and that no separate CPCN filing would be necessary for that.
Commissioner Gilman,
I agree.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree.
as do I.
Bringing things to a close now, it sounds like the Commission has decided that it makes sense to have a future proceeding to address Tri-State's next ERP. So I will include that language from your earlier discussion, but I just want to confirm that you're willing to have language that the Commission intends to have a future proceeding prior to the third Tri-State ERP filing.
Commissioner Gilman,
Yeah.
Commissioner Plant,
Agree.
as do I.
And finally, I'd like to thank you, commissioners, for taking up this matter so quickly this week after becoming fully briefed on everything. And I also have to tell you, though, that we are nevertheless behind schedule. And I would recommend that the Commission, by its own motion, waive Rule 23A-0585E, which would require this decision to be made a month earlier. But simply, we'll just need to waive that rule and get this Phase 2 decision out as soon as possible.
I'm happy to do that, and we can do this as an ABC order, Mr. Davis, and including the concerns expressed by both my colleagues, which I also support. Commissioner Gilman, Commissioner Plant, you okay with an ABC order?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I'll just send you a list of those concerns that I mentioned, just to be sure you have them.
Thank you, Commissioner Gilman.
Commissioner Plant?
Thanks, and I'll do the same.
Anything else for today, Mr. Davis?
No, thanks again for taking some time this Friday afternoon to take care of this. I'm sure Tri-State and the parties appreciate this as well. Thank you.
Yeah, time is of the essence. Thanks to you both. With that, we're adjourned. Thanks.
One last thing.
Oh,
Did we lose
lost.
Commissioner Plant? We've got two of you, though. Did we get a vote on the rule waiver?
We did. I think we did. If I support the rule waiver, Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah.
There we go. Thank you very much.
Anything else? Going
Nope.
once, going twice. Thanks, guys.